We have a little puzzle for you. What do these 5 seemingly random things have in common? Stubborn cows, watermelon quilts, postal service mistakes, horse-drawn wagons, and Abraham Lincoln. I did not expect responses, but I like that. Sure.
Everybody else give up? There are some of the fun and delightful things we experienced while just speaking to your mic, while traveling to the country, scouting for Rails to Trails Conservancy's most ambitious project ever, the Great American Rail Trail. I'm Mary Ann Fowler, Senior Policy Strategist at Rails to Trails.
I'm Kevin Belanger. We have to go back and forth. That's okay. I'm Kevin Belanger, Trail Planner at Rails to Trails Conservancy. Mary Ann and I, along with several of our colleagues who are also here in the room, have had the delight of traveling around the country to explore the viability of an idea that was once a potential in the distant future and now is ready to come to life.
The Great American Rail Trail will unite the country with a contiguous multi-use trail from Washington, D.C. to Washington State. Imagine getting on a bike in D.C. or lacing up your boots in Washington State and traveling from one end of the country to the other.
The Great American Rail Trail will unite the country, will be unique in many ways. In the US, we've already created the ability to drive across the country with the interstate system. And next week will be the 150th anniversary of the pounding of the Golden Spike that signified the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. But we don't have a safe way to walk or bike across the country without having to interact with heavy, fast-moving automobile traffic. The Great American Rail Trail, the vision of it is to provide exactly that and more along one continuous trail.
The term rail trail, the title, is purposeful. For those unfamiliar with them, rail trails are built on the beds of former railroad corridors. Early trains just didn't have the oomph to climb steep hills. They had to travel on relatively easy grades. So when railroads slashed their inventories dramatically in the mid-70s and 80s, we inherited their legacy of nicely designed and engineered rights-of-way of fairly gentle gradient, just perfect for trails. Of course, the Great American Rail Trail won't be entirely on rail trails. There just aren't enough abandoned corridors to go all the way across the country. But by incorporating a few canal tow paths, some rails with trails, and a minimum of backcountry roads, you hear that, minimum, we could traverse the continent with a gradient that remains true to our ideal of a trail, which is within the athletic reach of most Americans.
So the Great American Rail Trail could not be possible without the hard work and dedication of the public officials and staff and volunteers over the 125 existing trails that will host the route across the country. These people help build the trails. They run events on them, like Amy was talking about. They keep them maintained, which is super important to maintain a high-quality trail experience for everybody. And for that often thankless work, RTC wants to extend a hearty thank you on behalf of basically America for helping make this vision a reality.
Yes, and everything we do for the Great American Rail Trail, RTC will continue to highlight the work that the trail groups and public agencies do and have done to make this route possible. The trail is now more than 50% complete, with about 130 trails in its path. And RTC is ready to take leadership in connecting these trails and uniting a country with the route that goes from coast to coast. As we celebrate our 33rd anniversary, we are very proud to have 23,000 miles of rail trail now in existence and to have 130,000 members at RTC, an extraordinary number of supporting organizations, all of which combined will help us build this trail.
So in January, RTC announced 12 trails that we call the Gateway Trails to the Great American Rail Trail. These are 12 iconic trails that we know will be part of the route, and they were excited to announce their involvement early on in this process. This has been kind of a teaser as we put the final touches on the full preferred route across the country. We're going to be announcing that full preferred route a week from today, May 8th, via a live broadcast, a whole series of events across the country. I'm going to be in Montana, Marianne's going to be in Washington State, Leah right here will be in Indiana. We're going to do a whole series of events to roll that out. So May 8th, wake up in the morning, go to greatamericanrailtrail.org. You'll see all of our materials about that, an online map, a route assessment report, and we're super excited to finally put that out to people. However, in the meantime, while we have you in front of us, Marianne and I are going to give you a little glimpse of the journey that we've taken to get to this point. RTC staff has visited all 12 states and the district, and to prepare for next week's reveal, we've gotten quite a few stories, and we're going to share a few of them with you today.
That's because we like to tell stories. Double entendre. RTC felt confident in the existing trails and possibilities of future trails east of the Mississippi, but there are far fewer rail trails in the west because there were fewer rail lines to start with. We decided to go check things out for ourselves to determine the viability of a route through the Mountain West. Our first stop was to Wyoming and Montana, right after Thanksgiving in 2016. We saw the wonderful Casper Rail Trail, one of the gateway trails which heads through Casper and provides the initial spine of the Great American Rail Trail through Wyoming.
So do you remember that list of things I rattled off in the beginning? Yeah. You remember those stubborn cows I mentioned? So living in DC, we sometimes get caught up in the hustle of it all. Conveniently, cows don't care about that. So here's the view. Marianne, Eli, and I went out to Wyoming, driving west out of Casper, trying to check out some old rail lines. These cows were in no hurry to let us pass. And like any long-distance journey, patience and a sense of humor of using dumb animations in a PowerPoint presentation will help you get far. So we hung out while these cows took their sweet time crossing. Also on that trip, we played a game of I Spy with antelopes that blended in with the snowy landscape perfectly. Anyone spot the antelopes in this picture? Yeah, they're up there in the top. I'd never seen an antelope in the wild before, so it was really cool for an East Coaster myself to see one in their natural habitat.
He also played this game called My Cows. Antelopes didn't count. Those were my antelopes, not his.
Come find us at Happy Hour later. We'll explain that game
We also visited Buffalo Bill's dining room in Cody, Wyoming. You can almost hear the player piano in the background. And another fun fact, Buffalo Bill is a relative of mine. I bet you didn't know that, Kevin?
She has a lot of relatives.
That's right. Anyway, so we visited the headwaters of the trail system in Three Forks, Montana. It is the headquarters of the Missouri River, hence the name, and is in such a beautiful place. Kevin and I drove into town and were drawn to this park with a railroad car from the old Milwaukee Road, a former electrified rail line that traveled between Chicago and Seattle. Being inquisitive and a bit bold, we walked up to the car to see if we could get in. And lo and behold, not only did the door open, but we found Dee and Caroline. They were representatives of the Three Forks Chamber of Commerce and were eager to share details on Three Forks and the Headwaters Trail System. To our astonishment and surprise, they were using maps printed from RTC's website as guides for trail users. The Headwaters Trail is also one of the gateway trails.
Do you remember that watermelon quilt I mentioned earlier? Anyone spot that in the corner there? Yeah. Every time I show this picture to people, they always notice that quilt first because it's really good. It's kind of taken on a life of its own. Three Forks is one of the towns we're going to be broadcasting live from next week. I look forward to getting to go there in person.
We visited the Cowboy Recreation and Nature Trail in Nebraska, another one of the gateway trails to the Great American Rail Trail. It is one of the longest rail trail conversions in the country. This is the bridge crossing the Niobrara River near Valentine, and here is the Tahazuka Park in the town of Norfolk.
So, fun fact, the town spelled like Norfolk, Virginia, but we learned that it is pronounced Norfolk. It is originally named as such because it is on the North Fork of the Elkhorn River. However, rumor has it that when the town was incorporated, they sent their name to the Postal Service in DC, and one of the first examples of an autocorrect, they decided, oh, you spelled that wrong, so we're just going to make the town called Norfolk. So no, it's Norfolk. So many years later, intrepid Norfolkians still pronounce it that way, and we make sure whenever we are in Nebraska, we say the same so we don't seem like newbies.
The park in Norfolk is the eastern terminus of the Cowboy Trail. After a day of meetings in Lincoln, we really wanted to see the trailhead. It was perhaps not the best day for visiting. So cold and windy. Anyway, the Cowboy Trail is an integral part of the Great American Rail Trail, and we look forward to returning when the sun shines brightly and the fields are ripe with Nebraska corn, and I want to find a corn husker. Unfortunately, the trail has experienced significant damage from the awful spring flooding that occurred out there, but the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission is working hard to get it back in good condition.
The Great American Rail Trail will also incorporate the Palouse to Cascade State Park Trail, formerly known as the John Wayne Pioneer Trail, which crosses Washington State. The Palouse to Cascade stretches over 200 miles across the state from the Idaho border to Rattlesnake Lake near Cedar Falls in King County. For 28 years, the John Wayne Pioneer Wagons and Riders Association has taken a cross-state ride, hence those horse-drawn wagons I mentioned earlier. They'll be taking off for their annual ride on May 16th. Unfortunately for you all, their roster is entirely full. But if you want to come next year, you got to be on top of your game there.
However, they still aren't able to cross the Columbia River by trail. Here's the view of the Beverly Bridge that Kevin and I first saw on our visit there. The bridge has been closed since rail service on the Old Milwaukee Road ended in 1980. Trail users have to go 100 miles out of their way to the next safe and legal crossing. RTC has been working with the Palouse to Cascades Trail Coalition and the state of Washington to reopen the Beverly Bridge for trail use. And as my plane landed here in Syracuse on Sunday, I had an email from the governor's staff in Washington state saying that the funding to rehab and reopen the Beverly Bridge had just been approved by the state legislature. We'll soon be crossing the bridge together.
So we spent a lot of time talking about our western visits. We've certainly spent some time in the east as well. Here is a train on the Kokosing Gap Trail, one of the many trails that combine to form the Ohio to Erie Trail. Am I correct, Eric, on that? Our Ohio office person here. Now, you may be thinking, I made it through that whole list, right? I made it through stubborn cows, watermelon quilts, postal service mistakes, horse-drawn wagons. But where in the world does... Oh, no, hold on, I have to do that again. Where does Abraham Lincoln come into all this? That's the best part of this whole presentation.
And you blew it.
So, Eric, Leah, and I actually had the pleasure of traveling through Jefferson County, Ohio in 2018, reviewing trail gaps with some of our colleagues, and we stumbled upon this old stone bridge across Cross Creek. Sorry, it's real zoomed in here, it's a little farther out. An old wood trestle formerly crossed the creek here, one of the only ones not made of stone on that original rail line. As Abraham Lincoln traveled from Illinois to D.C. for his inauguration in 1861, the 37-foot tall wood bridge that was originally here had been damaged by a fallen tree, and conductors were worried that the train carrying the president-elect and all of his team could not make it across the bridge safely. So they asked them to step off and walk across the bridge. The bridge happened to be slick with rain and train oil that day. Lincoln lost his footing and tripped, almost fell off the bridge. Thankfully, he did not. That would have been a real tragic thing. Thankfully, he stayed on, made it across. The train made it across after him. Everyone made it to D.C. fine. One of Lincoln's first executive orders was to fund a new stone bridge right here crossing Cross Creek. This line is no longer active. The rail line is yet to be built. When it is, it would make an excellent addition to the trail network in Ohio.
Lincoln has another important relationship to the Great American Rail Trail. Even as the nation was fighting a war to threaten to divide us north and south, Lincoln was determined to bind the country together east to west. So from the Oval Office in Washington, D.C., he signed several pieces of legislation creating the Transcontinental Railroad, whose 150th anniversary we celebrate on May 10th, as Kevin said. Speaking of Washington, D.C., from my perspective, living close by and working there, this is where the Great American Rail Trail begins, right on the west steps of the U.S. Capitol, proceeding across the National Mall, a gateway to the rest of the country. And here's the view you'll have when you're taking off from the Capitol on a journey westward to discover your country. We have many other stories of our travels, and there are millions more stories to be made. Everyone who embarks on a journey on the Great American Rail Trail will make their own story. That's what makes this endeavor so very, very special.
So whether you're taking a huge cross-country trip, or like Amy was saying, enjoying an afternoon stroll on one of the trails in your backyard that happens to be part of this route, You too will have your own stories, your own mishaps and adventures and interactions with cows, new friends, beautiful memories to make on the trail.
Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you on the Great American Rail Trail. And when you wake up on May 8th, don't forget to visit www.greatamericanrailtrail.org to see the full preferred route of this exciting trail. Thank you.
Thank you.